A Supreme Court ruling in New York for religious freedom, the media's impact on the election, and gun ownership becomes much more popular. All this and more on this episode of the Federalist Files. But first, a message from your Supreme Leader.
So I deeply believe that people should be treated equally under the law, regardless of sexual orientation.
I was shocked you talked about that in the book.
But we all, I think there are big chunks of our community where that's still controversial. People were surprised about a lot of Hispanic folks who voted for Trump. But there's a lot of evangelical Hispanics who, the fact that Trump says racist things about Mexicans or puts detainees, undocumented workers in cages, they think that's less important than the fact that, he supports their views on, gay marriage or abortion, right?
It's hard to believe.
Now, that was our glorious ex-president, Obama. He has been involved in some deep state activity throughout this current administration that's been going on. If Joe Biden were to win, it would be a guaranteed third Obama administration, essentially. I have a feeling, based off of a lot of this Mike Flynn stuff, as well as the Mueller investigation, emails between Hillary and Obama and Joe Biden looking for investigations between Peter Strzok, people that are unfamiliar with the case, Peter Strzok, as well as Lisa Page, the two FBI agents that were saying we're going to ensure that Trump doesn't win, all this stuff. They were emailing each other back and forth and text messaging saying, I think they were saying either BO or the big man or something like of that nature wants to know what we're doing or wants the status on this, and they're referring to a Barack Obama-like character. That's just my speculation. I mean, I've heard from a lot of, Dan Bongino's very deep on the case. If you ever look up his name, he has a lot of internal connections to the Secret Service as well as FBI agents and people that are inside of the government. So he has a lot of sourcing on this. He wrote like 3 different books on it, if anyone's interested in that. But all that being said, Barack Obama makes disparaging comments about our Hispanic voters. To begin with, just to preface my comments here, you have Charlemagne the God, who constantly is doing interviews with Democrats. I mean, people that were in for nomination. There was Elizabeth Warren. There was Kamala, where that was the interview, the famous interview where Kamala said back in the 80s she was listening to Tupac when Tupac wasn't even rapping back in the 80s, and he was not mainstream at that point. I believe Tupac came to prominence in the early 90s. But like in 85, she was saying when she was in college that she was listening to Tupac because she's full of it, and she's just a hack. And really, Democrats will say anything to try to relate to the regular voter. But, so he asks him the question. I mean, Obama's talking everyone should be treated equally based on, sexuality, what have you. And to tell you the truth, if anybody can recall, Donald Trump's actually the first president to ever run in his very first term as a pro-gay marriage president. Barack Obama did not do that. So I guess over the last, 8 years or over the last 12 years now, I guess he's changed his view on gay marriage suddenly, just to pretty much aggrandize himself in his second autobiography that he wrote in 4 years, because he's the most narcissistic person that has probably ever ran in politics. And I'll tell you, this is why I believe that Obama is behind a lot of what is going on right now in the Democratic Party. Like I said in before videos, he was in a lot of communist groups in college. Different people have him on record stating that, he was a commie, like I said, stating that we're going to have to overthrow the system to implement our policies and what we want. And then I guess he must have figured out through the years that he can kind of run under the guise of the Democrat Party, and he can implement those policies that way in a much more civil manner. So he's a recorded, there is history of his leanings towards communism. He's the only president in 100 years to ever step down from the position after they have served in the presidential spot and still retain a hold in D.C., still have a house there, still have real estate, still live there, and then he goes to Martha's Vineyard like on the weekends or what have you. But he's the only guy to do that in 100 years. So he's deep in politics. He just likes to act like he's not. He's definitely in there. And Charlemagne the God is another guy that, this speaks to the narrative of the left at this point, where Obama, he says Hispanic voters that pretty much didn't vote for our platform, didn't approve of the Democratic Party, instead of looking into being circumspective and criticizing himself or criticizing the Democratic Party's policies or their platform, instead of doing that, his initial response is just to attack them, pretty much calling them homophobic. They're anti-abortion, saying the fact that they vote for Donald Trump, even though he says racist things about Mexicans, it doesn't matter because, they line up on gay marriage, views of gay marriage, as well as what else did he say? The gay marriage comment and the I can't think of the other one now, but the gay marriage comment. First off, like I said, Donald Trump's first president to ever run pro-gay marriage. He had people in his cabinet. I think his name's Sean Parnell, I believe, is homosexual, and he's in his cabinet working in foreign countries to decriminalize homosexuality. So it is very odd that he says things. I mean, he says things like this because he knows no one's going to check him on it. The Democrat media, and the Democrats, I repeat myself, they're both the same. They do not question him on anything. He just continues to do, they say whatever they want, the Democrat Party in general. There's no questioning. Like, even that he said that, Trump makes racist comments about Mexicans. This is not true. Any racist comment that you've ever heard that you perceive as racist from Donald Trump, if you take the clip and you record it a full minute before and a full minute after to gain a context on what he's actually saying, it is not racist. So any racist, anything that has been deemed as racist by the left is something, for example, when he was talking about the coyotes that were coming over the border, pretty much people that are engaged in human trafficking. Donald Trump called them, animals. People that are known, MS-13 members are known for pulling people's beating hearts out, innocent people, killing innocent people. He called them animals. Which I would like to think that we can all have at least a consensus agreement on people that commit crimes against humanity such as those, or are engaging in the underage human trafficking trade. We would call them animals. But, the media stands up for those people, I guess. So, and anti-abortion, that was the other thing he was talking about, which is true. Trump does not. Trump, at first, when he ran, he didn't seem like he was super anti-abortion. I think the further and further he continued to serve as the president and people stood by him, he became much more a vessel for conservatism, because he really did not run as such a conservative president. I mean, as a nomination or a nominee. He ran much more in the middle, kind of as an alternative to the swamp and the establishment. But so that's, and this is something that, it's like I said, now the Democrat Party doesn't look at themselves and perceive, say, hey, high taxes. I just saw a statistic, and it's amazing. Since the 80s, the amount of these rich counties that vote in favor of the Democrat Party, in the 80s, it used to be like, 9 out of the top 50 states or counties vote for the Democrat Party. Now it's substantial. It's a majority, like a high majority. So now it's going to show the Democrat Party is now for the rich. It is not for the working class person. And now the Republican Party has gained a bunch of working class individuals and citizens. And the Democrat Party, instead of looking at themselves and looking at their platform, they're the head of the party. Everyone knows who it is. It's Barack Obama. Instead of doing that, they just disparage, or they condemn, or they make derisive comments about Hispanic voters, because Hispanic voters didn't turn out for the Democrat Party, because some of them may be, evangelical Christians, which is very, this condemning and this dehumanizing of or vilifying of religious people is something that's been new in the last maybe 20 years. That's how you push the pro-abortion policy, I guess. That's how you get people to buy into the government, and they promulgate this to really vilify these individuals because of their religion. But it seems like the Democrat Party does not vilify any other religion other than Christianity and maybe, Judaism every once in a while, but other religions are okay. They don't attack them. It's not okay because then it's considered Islamophobic if you attack the other religions. So now, like I said, it's full of inconsistencies, that video with Barack Obama. And now what I have here, I have a jam-packed episode here for you. Is going to be at least an hour long. I got a lot of stuff. Hopefully the mic situation's figured out. Hopefully I've fixed it and resolved it. My other mic, I was having some feedback issues. It was really cheap mic. It was not well built. So this new one I have in the corner of the screen, if you could see it, hopefully I fixed a lot of that feedback and I come in more clearly for the listeners and the viewers. But this very first video, it's a news buster, or the very first clip I have, the very first source. It is newsbusters.org. That's the name of the site. I'm going to leave everything that I'm talking about in the description. Media Research Center study on media's impact on the election. So it's titled Special Report, The Stealing of the Presidency 2020. Now, this is a pretty long source I have, but I think it's well worth it. Now, they surveyed the Media Research Center asked the polling company to survey 1,750 Biden voters in 7 swing states, and they are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. So pretty much it's all the states at the very end here that have given Biden what, according to the media, would be a victory if all these lawsuits somehow subside and they're no longer pursuing the Trump team, if they were no longer pursuing. So now they were 6 of these states were called for Biden, according to the media. And they found that a huge majority, 82% of the Biden voters, were unaware of at least one of these key items, with 5% saying they were unaware of all 8 of the issues that they tested. So what they did was they asked, hey, you were about this about Biden, this, that. And the questions had to do with his character, had to do with Trump, had to do with other things. And they found that 17% said they would have abandoned. It said 1 of every 6 Biden voters we surveyed, 17% said they would have abandoned the Democratic candidate had they known the facts about one or more of these news stories, which is a huge margin. I mean, that's a substantial amount of voters, but that is a representation of how the media has suppressed any negative opinions or any negative information about a Joe Biden candidate, whereas with Donald Trump, they have full on, they've propagated that Donald Trump is a racist, a white supremacist, a horrible person, doesn't care about anybody, he does a horrible job with pretty much everything, like across the board. They pretty much hate him no matter what. The economy, he can't even get any type of, there's no respect at all, as Rodney Dangerfield would say. There's nothing for the economy that they even praise Trump for. So they've been burying Biden's bad news. That's what it says here. The media's censorship of Biden scandals had the strongest impact on this year's election. According to our survey, more than 1/3 of Biden voters, 35.4%, were unaware of the serious allegations brought against the Democrat nominee by Tara Reade, a former staffer who said Biden sexually assaulted her. Now, those allegations were something like, he penetrated her with his hands. I mean, I don't really want to get into specifics because I'm trying to keep it family friendly, but that's what happened. Apparently he pinned her up against a wall, and that's what he did. And he whispered something creepy in her ear. I can't remember what it exactly is, like something like, oh, I heard you liked me, or something weird like that. It's a creep. If they have known about these Tara Reade sexual assault allegations, 8.9% told us they would have changed their vote. That's amazing, though. If that only 8.9%, you would think it's the party of the hashtag #MeToo movement, that it would be a higher percentage of that. I guess it's just a double standard that, just like Obama's comments, it's a double standard where if you replaced, Biden's name with Donald Trump, then it would be a totally different scenario and different story. Imagine if Donald Trump came out there and condemned Hispanic voters as homophobic. That'd be really something, wouldn't it? Now, not voting for any presidential candidate. Yeah, they would consider not voting or voting for a third party candidate rather than voting for Biden. So they're not even saying that they would vote for Trump. Oh, they would. It says they would switch to Trump or third party candidate, not voting or not voting at all. Okay, so 8.9% of them said that. By itself, that would have flipped all six of the swing. By itself, that would have flipped all six of the swing states won by Biden: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I mean, these are all things that haven't been really actually confirmed because the electors still have to go vote. You know, the legislatures of the states have to confirm. It has not yet been confirmed. It's been confirmed, you know, as of right now by the media, by just vote tallies that they've received. So even more Biden voters, 45.1%, said they were unaware of the financial scandal with his son, Hunter, a story infamously censored by Twitter and Facebook as well as ignored by the liberal media, which is correct. According to our poll, full awareness of the Hunter Biden scandal would have led 9.4% of Biden voters to abandon the Democratic candidate. So these people actually have I guess they're more lenient towards sexual assault than they are, because 9.4% compared to an 8.9%, I guess they're more lenient for sexual assault rather than taking money from China. According to our poll, oh yeah, that's what they said. So flipping all six of the swing states once again, and that would give President Trump 311 electoral votes. Now, the ticket's left-wing ideology was another issue barely mentioned by the national press. A GovTrack analysis found Biden's running mate, California Senator Kamala Harris, that she's one of the most left-wing senators in the history. This is all, you know, this is all information I've said before. Our poll found that 25.3% of Biden voters said they didn't know about Senator Harris's left-wing ideology. And if that were the case and they knew the complete story, then 4.1% of the Biden voters would have changed their votes, and that would flip Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to Trump. And that would give him 295 electoral college votes. So if just one of the, I mean, there's even more of these, but even if just one of these scenarios, if the people were aware, if they were actually given the non-left, super left-wing censorship media garbage that they spew, and all they did was talk about COVID-19, even when there was people in the streets rioting, looting, and killing, and attacking people, assaulting them in the middle of the street, innocent people, they weren't reporting that. In the very beginning, when the protests came out, and then once they actually started to get violent, then the left-wing media would pretty much shut it off, and you wouldn't even watch it after the first week. And rioting went on in places like Portland for something like 3-4 months, and they would not report it. They would just stop, because they don't want to make their party look bad, because they know those are their voters. That's not their base. That's not their base. I'm not going to say, you know, all voters are like that, because I don't do the Obama game where I just attack people instead of attacking the platform that we run on. You know, high taxation, benefiting the rich, giving bailouts to big corporations, making small businesses shut down. And then in doing that, you have transferred. Jeff Bezos has doubled. He has doubled his net worth in these last couple months, because you shut down all these small businesses and you pretty much handed over all the money to Jeff Bezos. That's what happened in the last couple months. And you know who did this? Is all Democrat elected governors. So this is now no longer the party of the working class man, the small business owner. It isn't. And anyone that pays attention to what's going on with legislation, anyone that pays attention to what is going on with the mainstream media and the way in which they propagate these stories, you know that the Democrat Party is no longer representative of the little guy like they used to be years ago. Now, one of these days I'll find that picture that I saw, that study about how all these rich counties are now voting for Democrat, where they used to not vote for Democrat and they used to vote Republican. Now, here I have a chart, and this is the percent of people that were unaware of a lot of the scandals and then a lot of the positive stuff that Trump has done. And it shows pretty much that there would be a 17% shift away from Biden in if all these were put together in one. There'd be a 7. And this isn't if every single person knew about all these things. This is if every single person knew about just one of these things, then this would switch over 17% of the vote, which is a substantial amount of the vote. Now, hiding Trump's success. This is the next part of the story. So, hiding Trump's success, the liberal media also prevented many Biden voters from learning about record-breaking positive economic news in the months leading up to the election. The 5 pre-election jobs reports from June 5th to October 2nd showed a record 11 million jobs were created in the extraordinary snapback from the pandemic recession. Yet a large number of Biden voters, 39%, so we're talking like more than a third, said they didn't know about this achievement. If they had, 5.4% said they would have changed their vote. This would have swung Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin once again, 295 electoral votes for a victory for Trump. On October 29th, the government reported a huge jump in economic growth, 33.1% on an annual basis, double the previous record. Yet nearly half of Biden voters, 49%, said they had no idea about the record-breaking achievement. Armed with that information, 5.6% said they would have changed their vote. That would have swung Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Another 295 electoral votes for Trump. Now, like I said, I mean, this is all these jobs that were added to a company. I'm going to just disclose this statement to try to give it some sort of a context here. They were added after there was a huge economic loss, but adding all those jobs were jobs that were there before this COVID-19 thing went on, and all these jobs were lost to begin with because, like I said, Democrat governors, you have the media promulgating a story to scare people from even going out to businesses and going out to restaurants and eating and what have you. So these were all jobs that were there beforehand. They were lost in a huge, substantial loss, a lot of layoffs. People were, if you worked in like the food industry, they would send all of their waitresses and waiters home pretty much, and they would just keep the cooks, and they were doing outgoing orders. So they furloughed a lot of people, and then they hired them right back. So that's really where you're seeing that number jump. But the real point is, over these 4 years, you've seen a substantial amount of jobs come back to the economy, and then you've watched a huge GDP increase. And I think it was the 1 year he had like a 3% GDP increase, and that was something that Obama said he's going to need a magic wand to get a 3% GDP increase. And he got it like within the first 2 years of his presidency. So the political class and the media. I was reading an article today. People like Ted Lieu, because he's such a hack job. He's a representative in California. He was tweeting about how Donald Trump goes and he likes to golf. And apparently, there's this big media study that came out that he golfs 20% of his time or something like that. And my tweet in response to that is, wow, that's pretty impressive. You're telling me a guy that spends 20% of his time in his other estates golfing still does a better job than all you guys have done for the last 40 years? It is impressive. It goes to show that you guys don't work as hard as this dude does, obviously, and you guys just don't care, and you're in it for yourselves. Because if you're telling me that a person that only shows up to work 80% of the time, or 75% of the time, because you're saying 25, I think it was something like 20 something. I'll round it up. I don't even care. So you're telling me this guy works 75% of the time actually at the White House, and he still beat you guys out by a wide margin. He destroyed you in the numbers. And then that's another thing, is they are appointing Biden's cabinet. I was going to say Biden because it's pretty much an Obama-Biden presidency. Obama is in the background pulling the strings, but they're coming out with the cabinet right now. It's hilarious. John McCain's wife, I harped on this a couple videos ago about how the McCains have no conviction and they're just complete clown show, and they act as if they are conservative, the McCains. If I didn't mention the McCains, if I said Clintons, I felt like I said Clintons. But the McCains, just to be clear, McCains have no conviction. They're hacks. If they really believed, if they were really against abortion, if they were really pro-Second Amendment, pro-First Amendment, they would never go tell people to vote for Joe Biden. Now, if they don't like Donald Trump, they would tell people, hey, listen, I'm not voting for Donald Trump. I don't like him. But you would not go tell people to vote for a Joe Biden if you are about any of those founding principles, which they're not. They're hacks. They just do whatever they can for expediency. So they're looking to appoint her to be an ambassador, McCain's wife. I don't even know her name because she's just so irrelevant, really. So they're looking to appoint her to be the ambassador to the UK. And then John Kerry is going to be like some sort of climate change czar. You're seeing the swamp come back in full force, the people that are being appointed, and then you're seeing an exalting of them by the media. The media is propagating them and making them, glorifying them, really, oh, this is a cabinet of vast experience, and it's really nice to get them back in the White House. And then you see, and then they're talking about globalism openly. They're like, oh, we're gonna go around, we're gonna make sure all the other countries that we're not only helping Americans, but we're helping other countries too. And then we're gonna get another. This is gonna be another war. That's what'll end up happening. We're gonna send a bunch of young guys over, a bunch of our youth, a bunch of our very promising Americans, very patriotic Americans, over to a Middle Eastern country for no reason. Again, that's what's going to happen, because that's what it sounds like to me. And then you got James Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, is like, we're going to change America first to everyone else first. And he said something like that. We're going to change our motto from America first. I mean, it's obvious. If you're paying attention, it's obvious. These are all pushes incrementally towards a globalism, and it's not even now. It's transparent and it's conspicuous. It's out there in the open. Now, they saw the same effect when it came to foreign policy with President Trump. The media misreported all of this as well. Now, these peace agreements between Israel and several of the Arab neighbors. One reason that Trump received 3 nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize, yet 43.5%, so it's almost half of Biden voters, were unaware of this information. And this information led to a 5% of people would have changed their votes, because I'm sure that there are a lot of some Jewish voters will vote on Israel relations. If they have family that lives over there, they want their family protected and to stay safe, which would make sense. And just because of the history of the way in which the Jews have been almost kicked out of a lot of historically in Europe years ago, before even before World War II, Jews weren't allowed to go to college. So there was definitely always been some sort of weird issue with Jews and European. I guess maybe the Christians didn't like them. They've always been ostracized throughout our history. So anytime that any nominee comes in and they talk negatively about Israel, like, everyone always acts like they like Israel when they're running, and then once they win, you see what actually happens. I mean, the Republican Party historically has really not done much for Israel, but the Democrat Party's been even worse. They've stood on the sides of Palestine and Hamas, the Hamas terrorist group. But so 5% of the overall Biden voters would have changed their vote, and then that would have led to another 295 electoral votes. Now, in energy independence, this is a huge one. This has been a huge spike in our economy. It has been very beneficial to us, because once we're energy independent, we don't have to rely on countries like Russia, as well as any of the Middle Eastern nations. And this is the reason why President Obama was pretty much in the pocket of the Iranian government, because the Iranian government had such a substantial surplus of oil. And if he wanted to get it for a reasonable price, he had to kind of play nice with them. And the way in which the media right now is condemning America, it's very, I think it's the New York Times. I was reading a headline, and maybe I'll get into this in a video in the future, but they are condemning our military operations for taking out the nuclear scientist in Iran. And I that's the way they word it. From what I read earlier in the week, he was like second in command of a terrorist or the Iranian like military or something like that. I mean, this is a guy that's responsible for killing Americans. And it's the same thing that happened with al-Baghdadi, is they made it like he was a religious scholar, like he was this great guy and stuff. And then you go in and you look into it and you realize this guy's accountable for hundreds of American soldiers' deaths. And now we are glorifying this individual as if they did nothing wrong. Now, energy independence, like I said, was another thing. Now, this is because they expanded the drilling offshore, and they installed these long-standing pipelines, and it paid off with America becoming a net exporter of oil for the first time in September 2019. I think we are actually the biggest net exporter of oil at this point, because of fracking too, as well, because he took a lot of the regulation out. And this added to the jobs in Ohio as well as Pennsylvania, which is why it's so hard to believe that Pennsylvania didn't go to Trump, because if you drive through any parts of rural or even suburban Pennsylvania, not the city part, of Pennsylvania, you will see Trump signs out everywhere. Everyone that because I have friends that are in the trucking industry, and they will drive through Pennsylvania just because, it's part of their job for their next stop or what have you. And they've told me it's insane, the support and the Trump flags everywhere in Pennsylvania. It's like no matter where you go. So yeah, he helped them out. He added a lot of jobs to their economy. More than half of the Biden voters were unaware of this accomplishment. And they said if they knew this, 5.8% of the Biden voters say they would have changed their vote, and which is reasonable. It makes sense. A lot of our wars that have been started off of oil, things like that. That's what a lot of people like to believe, that the Middle Eastern War was not only started on 9/11, but it was also started over oil. I mean, years ago when I was a kid, we were talking about running out of oil by this time. It's the same thing with Al, what's his name? Al Gore was talking about how New Jersey was going to be underwater by 2025 or something like that. I remember seeing the charts with the whole global warming thing, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, even I was a kid. I was a little kid, and New York and Florida, New Jersey and Florida were going to be like totally underwater, and I think the same thing with California. And I was like, I don't know about that. When I was a kid, I thought that, So... It's just fucking, it's so ridiculous. Our poll found that 36.1% of Biden voters said they did not know about the administration's key role in promoting vaccine research through Operation Warp Speed. So that was the whole thing when Trump went on national television. He's talking about it's going to be Operation Warp Speed. Okay, that's what we're doing. We're very, very happy about Operation Warp Speed. So that was that whole thing. Pretty much they found they have vaccines. I think they're just trying to figure out the logistics of it, and they're trying to get it legalized through the states and approved or something through the federal government. But they have vaccines ready to go. I want to say something like 300 million of them will be out in the next couple months, hopefully. And these voters, they told this media research center, they told them that 5.3% of them said they would switch their vote, which once again would give him 295 electoral votes, Trump. So putting it all together, all these 8 issues, like I said, 17% of Biden voters told us that they would have changed their vote if they were aware of one or more of these important stories. And that would chalk up a 311 to 227 electoral victory for Donald Trump. And this is another, now I'll put up another visual for you. This is just something they have on the site. Now, Media Research, Center. I think that's what they're called. Now, the margin in Pennsylvania, Trump victory would have been 435,000 votes. Michigan would have been 237,000 votes. Georgia would have been 356,000 votes. Arizona would have been 340,000 votes. Wisconsin would have been 191,000. And Nevada would have been 71,000 votes. Which, the fact that Trump was even close in Nevada was actually very surprising for a lot of people. The fact that Fox called Arizona early was very surprising for people as well. That's that. That just, that is a representation of how the media likes to impact the election. That's a campaign donation. When they were saying the Russians, they helped Trump. There was 1,000 bots and they posted things on people's websites. Listen, I post this podcast everywhere to try to get as much viewership as I can. If I get something like 600 or 700 just views of the podcast, depending on what the heading is and depending on what information is going to be in the podcast, I'll get maybe, I have a good podcast listenership, but if I have a really good title on there, I'll get maybe 110, 120 views. That's it. 110, 20 views on YouTube, and then I'll have my podcast listenership, which is always consistent. I always have like at least 13 people on podcast every day that listen to it. And that's been increasing, though, over time. I mean, when I first started, you initially get that spike because everyone's surprised that you have a podcast, and they're like, oh my God, let's check this out. And then they turn in and they think you're boring, or they don't like politics, and then they tune out, and then you get a consistent, amount of people that listen. Now, the next article I have isn't exactly related, but I think it's very important, and we really need to exploit it, and we need to show what's going on right now in our school system. Now, this is from Bongino.com. It's a report written by John Hawkins, and it says, report, F grades have gone up 83% since remote learning has begun. Now, Fairfax, this is a report coming out of Fairfax County Public Schools. They found that since remote learning began in March, which is, at this point, it's like last year. The number of Fs earned by middle and high school students has jumped 83%, according to report analysis. 35% of students are underperforming in math, and 39% are coming up short in English. Additionally, as you can see from this table and the report, things are even worse for students that were already struggling, which is correct. Now, just to preface this chart that I'm going to put up, Fairfax County is actually known as, I think it's the 7th richest county from what I read in this article in the country. So we're talking about, this is the richest, some of the wealthiest areas, and these kids aren't doing well. So only imagine what's going on, because in the wealthiest areas, they'll take a huge tax burden just to try to pay for the best possible teachers, because the teacher unions love their money, and that's supposed to somehow translate into really good teaching, which most of the time it really doesn't, but they'll spend a lot of money. These are schools that are nice. These kids have everything. They probably get a computer sent home with them. If they don't get that, their parents have it because they're rich. So these are students, and if you see this visual here, the middle school students have increased 350% in their Fs. All secondary students, which I'm not exactly sure what a secondary student is, if that's elementary, that might be what it is. That's 120% increase. So just to try to put it in perspective, we're looking at black students, 13% are failing. We're looking at, because that's really, the increase is important, but then it's also important to look at the percentage. So Hispanic students have a 136% increase. 26% of them have an F in 2 or more classes, which is huge. I mean, you fail 2 classes, that's substantial. That could hold a kid back. Not only that, it's not only about being held back, not being put through the system, but more importantly, it is about actually learning in these schools. If you get especially in these high schools and middle schools, because college really is what matters a lot of the time if you go to college, and high school means more than the middle school and the elementary school do. But so you're setting these kids up for failure. I have family members that are teachers, and my family member that's a teacher teaches 5th grade and says that these kids are still at a 4th grade or a 3rd grade reading level because of everything that went on in the last year, where all these kids were doing school from home, but they did not have an apparatus or a mode of operation set up for these kids. So these kids pretty much screwed off for a couple months, which you can't blame them because they're kids, and that's how it works when you're a kid. So the teacher union for sure has a huge impact on the way in which these legislators or these governors, they decide to shut down. If one person gets sick right now in New Jersey, they're just shutting down the whole school's district pretty much. That's what's going on over here. Other states, it might be a little different. And all the studies show that kids are at the lowest risk for COVID-19. Last time I checked, there's been 1 kid in the entire country that has passed away from COVID-19, and they had a lot of pre-existing conditions, such as asthma, what have you. But I'm not trying to it's just what I'm trying to say here is the risk is just so low for these kids. And we're going to make it like they're really not at risk. The real problem is we have teacher unions that don't want to teach, that don't really care about the kids. And then there's teachers that also don't want to teach, and they're the loudest voices to the teachers union. I am personally part of a union. I've been part of about 3 different unions. From my experience, public sector unions are the worst from my experience. They do a horrible job. All they care about is people that have the seniority and are at the very top of the seniority list and have the loudest voices. And it seems like there's an acceptance and there is a compliance from other people that don't really even agree with the loudest voices, from my experience in my public sector union that I'm in. And the kids take the hugest hit from this. This never actually really affects the teachers. The teachers are pretty much, gym teachers right now, they're getting paid. I don't even know what they're doing. They could be doing maybe a video class. I'm not really sure exactly. Like I said, I have family members that are teachers. My family members that are teachers believe that they should be back in school because they think the kids are really suffering at this point. Just not being able to see your friends in general is just terrible for the kids. But, you got Hispanic students, they're failing at 26% rate. So 26% of them have 2 or more Fs. 136% increase. And then the English learner students, so students that are learning English as a second language, where I come from in New Jersey, it's a lot of Hispanic students that are learning English as a second language. That's a 37%, 131% increase. So here we go. So this is, like I said, this refers to the Democrats want open borders so they can get these workers in here and have cheap labor prices, and then they turn around and they don't even care about teaching these kids that are English learning as a second language. And not only that, but it seems like the people that always get hit hardest with anything like this that happens is always the lower income groups. And the party that's supposed to care so much about these lower income, the working class man groups, doesn't, because they shut down their schools, and because then when you shut down schools, kids are working from home. These parents have to stay home with their kids now at this point. I mean, school system is almost like, as well as it's supposed to be a learning system, it's almost like a babysitting system. And then I also like to call, this is coined by Buck Sexton. He says it's like a jobs program for adults, the school system in our country, because it's so screwed up with the unions. Next, I have a 5-4 Supreme Court ruling on religious freedom. This one's very interesting. Anyone that heard, I think it was over the weekend, last weekend, the Supreme Court ruled a 5-4. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Now, written by Ariane de Vogue, in a 5-4 ruling, Supreme Court sides with religious groups in a dispute over COVID-19 restrictions in New York. So this is a CNN article. I like to take some lefty sources, some righty sources. So a lot of time I like to take the left sources because I can point out the deception in it, and I like to exploit it and show you guys that I can, that what to look for, showing the bias in the media. So now what happened was religious, Governor Cuomo was ruling with his executive order that religious facilities were only allowed to have 10 to 15 people in their building. This was depending if they were in a red or orange zone. I guess they had some sort of zoning restrictions in New York. So just putting out a uniform, arbitrary rule to begin with is stupid, because if you have, that Joel Osteen-like church service where it's this huge, giant mansion-like building, and you're telling them that they're restricted to only 10 people, it's just nonsensical. And then you're telling people at their house, a really small trailer park-like house, that they also can only have 10 people. It doesn't really make any sense. It's hard to put a blanket over all scenarios and situations like that, and that's why I call it an arbitrary order. To begin with, it's an arbitrary order. And then second, it is a violation of the First Amendment. The fact that it's a 5-4 vote is pathetic. It should be a 9-0 vote. Now, when Cuomo initially came out with these churches, it was a church and I think a synagogue that he came down with this on. They initially put in for the appeal to the court, and now, the restrictions are less and less in New York. So this isn't the current restriction, but this solidifies in a court ruling in case law that there is religious freedom, that, the First Amendment doesn't just become void whenever there's a nightmare or catastrophe. And that's another thing I wanted to address. Whenever there is a nightmare or there's some sort of catastrophe, a calamity, this is when it is the most important that we have the Constitution, and it is the most important that we have our Bill of Rights. And if you can't follow that Bill of Rights, that's what it's for. It is for those catastrophe moments. It is not for when everything's good and everything's fine, everyone's doing great, everyone's living in this nice society, there's no issues. It is for the high stress, almost dangerous, the disastrous moments when everything is at a, when there is complete tumult and it is completely chaotic. That's when the Constitution should really show its power, and that's when it shouldn't be voided, because if it's voided at that point, then we have a serious problem, because that's the only time it's actually useful. Now, the court held, and I quote, not only is there no evidence that the applicants have contributed to the spread of COVID-19, but there are many other less restrictive rules that could be adopted to minimize the risk to those attending religious services, end quote. And then they continue, And I quote, "Members of this court are not public health experts, and we should respect the judgment of those with special expertise and responsibility in this area. But even in a pandemic, the Constitution cannot be put away and forgotten." Thank you. That's the whole point, like I said before, that in these high-stress scenarios, you don't put away the Constitution. That's actually when it's the most important and it's most significant, and that's when we are in need of it the most. And it really shouldn't even matter because we elect, here's the thing, we elect officials, and then those officials also choose the judges. We shouldn't be listening to government bureaucrats with special expertise because they have their own sways. Some of them have their own bias towards liberalism or leftism or conservatism. We shouldn't be going to them and saying, how should we follow? What are we going to do? And not worry about the Constitution. That shouldn't even be how it works. We shouldn't even be worried about, the spread of COVID-19. We're talking about a virus right now that is 99.9% does not kill you. 99.9% of the time. 0.01% of the time it's deadly, especially if you're a healthy person. Now, if you're an older person, it's a totally different story. If you're at risk, I'm not telling people that are at risk, to leave their houses and walk around with no mask on. But if you're somebody that's young, you're not in contact with someone that's at risk, there's no reason for really worrying about this. This is just like having a cold. I know people that have had it. They've been telling me it's like having a cold. Now, this is the First Amendment here in writing, and I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances," end quote. So there you go. Establishment of religion. They should not prohibit the free exercise thereof or abridge freedom. The big thing is, the peaceably assemble as well is supported under this. Now, Cuomo was pissed that this whole thing went on, and he believes that, it's a big political game. And he states, and I quote, "The basic point is, why does the court rule on an issue that is moot unless and which they had just decided several months before in other cases which presented the same argument? Why rule on a case that is moot and come up with a different decision than you did several months ago on the same issue? You have a different court," and I think that was the statement that the court was making, in quotes. So pretty much he's saying because now they have Amy Coney Barrett, they want to come out and make a political statement because they wanted to actually respect and protect religious freedom and peaceable assembly. And that's those are things that petty dictators and tyrants say, stupid things like that don't even make any type of sense. They have no semblance, and there really is no point behind it. And he just circumvents the Constitution. That's what he does, and he doesn't understand that those words actually mean something on paper. He doesn't really care about it. Now, Neil Gorsuch gives his opinion, and he states that other businesses, such as bicycle repair shops, did not have the similar restrictions, which is his point is that this is also a 14th Amendment issue. Like I said before, it is the Equal Protections Clause, is that how are you going to make certain rules apply to them, but then somehow the rules completely apply. Like, this bike shop can be open, it doesn't matter how many people they have, but my business has to have only 10 people. That's not fair. It has to be equal if you're going to do something like that. I think you don't even need to go with that defense. The defense should instantly be the First Amendment, but I understand where he's coming from because it's pretty much like a two-prong approach. And then he states, and I quote, "So at least according to the governor, it may be unsafe to go to church, but it is always fine to pick up another bottle of wine or shop for a new bike," end quote. So that's just him being, sarcastic. And then these are the lefty judges that all voted against it. And this is very troubling. And I'm going to explain really what should be done about these individuals. Now, Justice Stephen Breyer, joined by Justices Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor, who is the dumbest justice probably in the history of America, Sotomayor. If you ever read any of her decisions, they're very incompetent. I don't even know how she got her position. Now, they said that the regulations were designed, and I quote, "to fight the rapidly spreading and in many cases fatal COVID-19 virus," end quote, and that they allow the governor to identify hotspots where the virus had spiked. Breyer noted the grisly statistics concerning the virus that has infected more than 12 million Americans and is currently surging, and I quote, "The Constitution principally entrusts the safety of the health of the people to the politically accountable officials of the states," end quote. Breyer wrote, which isn't true. The Constitution does not entrust the safety and the health of the people to the politically accountable officials. If anything, it entrusts that safety and that health, if anything, to the people themselves, not to their government officials. You should not have a government official telling you what is safe and what isn't, and you really should go out and you should worry about your own safety and your own health. If anything, you can maybe make the argument that that the safety and the health of the people is in the hands of the people, but is definitely not in the hands of political officials and government bureaucrats. You cannot make that argument. If you read through the entire Constitution, there's no argument that you can make, and that's why they did not make a constitutional argument. They just said it very general terms. They did not point to any part of the Constitution because it is incorrect. It is an erroneous principle that they are just pulling out of their ass. That is all false. So, You notice the leftist bias in the New York Times when they say infected more than 12 million Americans, but they won't talk about the death rates. They'll just talk about how many infections. They'll say cases are spreading. That's a big thing that's going on right now in Texas. I think it's Texas. No, it's Florida. Florida, the cases are going up and they're this and they're that. And then if you look throughout the country, the cases are going up actually at way higher rates than it is in Florida. I think part of the reason is the climate in Florida because it's warmer a lot of the time. The colder it is, the more susceptible and the more your immune system is compromised. So in the northern states, I think it's higher. To be honest with you, I don't think it has anything to do, people point at governance. Deaths. When it comes to deaths and it comes to the nursing home policy, yes, I will point to our governors. But in terms of it just going up in specific spots, I don't really think it really has anything to do with executive orders or governorship. I think a lot of it has to do with climate and people getting under the weather because their immune systems are compromised. But they'll point to Florida constantly and say Florida's doubled in their cases, case rate. And then if you look around, but they'll say that, but then they won't talk about the death rate. They won't talk about how many people are dying in Florida, and then they won't talk about any of the rest of the country. And then you'll notice Florida's like really, really low on that list. If you look at the amount of increase that there's been, the increased rate of coronavirus spread throughout all the states. They're very low on the list, actually. They're doing a very good job. I think it's partially because of how warm it is in Florida. And in Florida, you got to think about it. A lot of people, they retire and they go to Florida, so you got a high population of older individuals living down there, too, as well. So that's that there. I mean, this is what I think should be done with these Supreme Court justices. When you turn around and you no longer protect the Constitution, you don't stand for the people, you should be voted out. I think you should be, because there are constitutional ramifications for that, such as an impeachment. If you decide like the ruling that they tried to pull off in D.C. versus Heller, I will always refer to that one as much as I possibly can because I think it is very important that at one time our Supreme Court tried to take individual gun ownership away from us, and this will harp on my next couple articles I have as well. Now that's very important. It is a significant story, as well as this one is. Anytime that they go against the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights in particular, that way in such a conspicuous manner where it is so obvious that they're trying to obviate the Constitution and they're trying to dodge it and subvert it, they should instantly be impeached by our House of Representatives, and then they should hold that vote in the Senate right after to get them out. That's what should really happen. And if there's no majority usually in all three, the executive and the two chambers of the Congress. But if this scenario happened during a Trump administration the first 2 years, we should be impeaching if we can. That's really what should happen. And this should be a bipartisan issue. We should want people that support our Constitution and stand up for it. But you have two different parties. One stands for it and the other one doesn't. And the one that stands for it doesn't completely stand for it either. They stand for it, though, to an extent. And the other side just does not care about the Constitution. They think it should be voided. They think it should be rewritten, which isn't going to happen. But the same thing that goes on with these governors with their executive orders, and I wanted to address this as well. There should be a qualified immunity taken away from these governors that go through executive orders, and then they cost people their livelihood and their businesses, and you have people committing suicide over this. there should be a stripping of that qualified immunity. Because governors are usually given, executive branch employees in general, the president's given certain qualified immunity, cops are given qualified immunity. You should strip governors of this qualified immunity, where you can't, now they are liable to civil suits when you go through executive tyrannical orders such as these, and you have people losing their entire retirement accounts. Because some people will retire and they'll open up a business like a bar, or they'll open up what have you, any business, and then you're telling them they have to shut down, and then they lose all their money. They're destitute in the street and they have nothing to show for it. Now, Governor Murphy's worth billions and billions of dollars. I think he's a big, he was like a Wall Street guy. I don't remember exactly the huge corporation that he worked for. Goldman Sachs, that's where he's from. Goldman Sachs, he's worth billions and billions. They should all sue him. Why not? You can't drain people's bank accounts and then expect them not to turn around and say F you and then do the same thing to you. That's how it should work in our country. That's just me personally. I think there are a lot of people that actually would agree with me there. It's not right what we're doing as small business owners. We need to stand up for our small business owners because they're the representation of America. So the next article I have here, it's gun control is plummeting in popularity. It is from Bongino.com, written by Matt Palumbo. If anybody's unfamiliar with Matt Palumbo, he is known for his book. It's called Debunk This. He takes a bunch of liberal ideology and a bunch of leftist policies, and he pretty much debunks them all throughout the book. I've yet to read it, but I thought it was very perplexing when I saw it. But I will maybe get around to it one of these days. It was written on November 16th, 2020, this article, and it's titled Gun Control Plummeted in Popularity This Year. Now, gun sales have surged in 2020, fueled by a pandemic, nationwide riots that Democrat leaders show little interest in stopping, and even prior to the election day, the mere prospect of a Biden-Harris administration that would implement new gun control measures. And I'll get to that in my next article. Those are, man, that's the way to end. I think that's how I'm going to end it, too. I think that's that might be the last article I have, and it's a hell of a way to end it because it's insane. So Americans, I purchased more guns than the first 8 months of 2020 than the entirety of 2019, and are on pace to make this year the biggest year for gun sales ever. Firearm seller Vista Outdoor has a backlog of over $1 billion in ammo purchases alone. These sales don't reflect existing gun owners hoarding firearms either, as there are over 5 million new gun owners this year. New gun owners. So we're not even talking about just people buying. There wasn't 5 million guns. It's 5 million new gun owners. So we have a bunch of people that own guns already on top of that. Likely the largest surge in gun ownership in the U.S. history. According to a latest poll from Gallup, Americans are less likely than they have been since 2016 to call for increased gun control. The latest majority, 57%. In the U.S., who call for stricter laws covering the sale of firearms, marks a 7% decline. So we're looking at a 7% decline in gun control, people that want gun control. At the same time, 34% of U.S. adults prefer that gun laws be kept as they are now, while 9% would like them to be less strict, which is the minority. The 9% is the minority. Gallup has been tracking the public's view on this measure since 1990, when a record high 78% of Americans supported stricter laws for gun sales as the national crime rates were rising. A majority of Americans held that position until 2008. Support then fell to a low 43% in 2011. Since the early 1990s, Americans' preferences for tougher gun control have generally peaked in the wake of prominent mass shootings and waned as the memory of each fades, which, that's the correlation. Usually if there's a mass shooting, what you're going to see is a spike in people that want gun control. In the 1990s, there was such, the crime rate was so high. There was a lot of those, that was during the time when all those rap groups came to prominence. It was something that I guess was kind of in the culture. There was just such a substantial amount of crime. If you look at the crime in the 90s, and then, you hit the 2000s, it's just a huge drop. I think it was the 80s, it was really, really bad. 90s, it kind of dropped. And then once it got to around the 2000s, it got better and better. I mean, now crime rates are at their, who knows now because of all the riots and stuff. But before that, they were at an all-time low. And I don't know if they attribute this really to gun sales. I wouldn't personally. It doesn't really make any sense. People are gonna commit a crime. I don't think it has to do with legal gun sales because there's a lot of illegal sales going on. So now you see a visual on the screen of people that want more strict gun laws have dropped from 64 to 57% in the last year, which is at it's almost at an all-time low if you don't look in at around 2011, and that I think that 2011, I think that's reflective of the Obama administration. I think people didn't want gun control because they were afraid actually of the tyrannical stuff that was going on at that time. I really do. And then there's people, kept as it is, less restrictive. I think all this is dependent really on what state you live in. In New Jersey, they have heavy restrictions on gun ownership, whereas in a state like Texas, it's not as, heavily restricted. Now, this next visual here is by this is more interesting to me, is the parties. You're even looking at a drop in the Democrat Party. It went from an 88% to an 85%, which isn't a huge... I mean, none of these drops are huge. This study really isn't that promising, to be honest with you. You would hope that gun ownership would be something that everyone in the country would kind of agree on, especially when you see everything that's going on with the rioting and looting, because when they bring that to your suburban area, that is going to affect you. So this next visual here is the partisan preferences. So you're looking at a 3% drop from Democrats, 88 to 85% want stricter gun laws, which is a pretty high percentage. 85% of them want stricter. But I think a lot of that has to do with ignorance. I've talked to people that are Democrats, talk about, oh, I think a gun's really hard to get. Oh, really? Have you ever tried to get one in New Jersey? No. Okay, then what are you talking about? You don't even know what you're talking about. You just make it up. You just make it up as you go along, just like the media. You do whatever the media tells you to do and tells you to say. Independents are looking at, they have a 4% drop, and then Republicans are going from 36% to 22%. There's been a lot of people that always voted Republican, but were not pro-gun people, and then once Trump got in there, they kind of realized, I guess, maybe they felt the importance of owning a firearm. I know a lot of people that are Republican voters that suddenly went out and got firearms. When you go to the gun shop, you see a lot of people are learning. They're going through classes. They're learning their very first time how to hold the gun, how to fire, how to dry fire, how to do things, all the safety protocols that are necessary. They're learning all of that. So you have a lot of people that have never even owned a gun. And I'm talking middle-aged people, people that have owned a gun, that have worked for their money. They do not want to see their house go down in flames. They don't want people to break in and do them harm, which is the reason for them learning and being responsible gun owners. So support for a ban on handguns in the U.S. remains low. That went from a 29 to a 25%. I think it's because of what's been propagated by our media. The media, vilifies rifles a lot of the time. So people never really believed in a ban on handguns, but more on rifles than anything else. Now, the conclusion here drawn is, and this is something that I've stated before, ironically, handguns make up a disproportionate share of firearm homicides in the U.S. Not the scary firearms that people want to regulate as in the rifles that they call assault rifles. That really is just cosmetic things that are put onto the rifle that make it somehow classified as an assault rifle. There were 4 times as many people killed with knives than all types of rifles. So when he refers to all types of rifles, he's talking about bolt action, he's talking about semi-auto, he's talking about every single type of rifle, even if it's a .22 little rifle shooting little small bullets. So those are not just their cosmetic assault rifles. So you got 4 times more people are killed with knives than all types of rifles. That support for gun control is disproportionately in favor of restricting assault rifles. Just goes to prove that what support there is for gun control is being driven by media hysteria and not the facts, which is true. Because like I said before, once you get a restriction or a ban on rifles, the next thing they're going to go for is handguns. Because like I said, 90%, it's around 90% of homicides are done by handgun. Gun homicide is done by handgun. And we're not even homicide is not considered murder. It's considered, one person killing another. That could be somebody coming in your house, trying to do you harm and you defending yourself. So there really isn't a context to a lot of those gun homicide statistics. And then there are also suicides. About a third of them are suicides. But I've already harped on that before. Now, Joe Biden, this is my next article from Breitbart. Joe Biden, a $200 tax. He wants to instill a $200 tax on assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. This is a very interesting article. I implore that you read it and you analyze it and you go and buy a rifle before this gets instilled as policy. Now, Joe Biden's gun policy could tax gun owners $200 for every high-capacity magazine they own. It says here. In an interview and this is so troubling, and this is something that, the media's been covering him for. In an interview last year with CNN's Anderson Cooper, Biden seemed to confirm his intention to disarm at least some Americans. Anderson Cooper asked him, and I quote, "So to gun owners out there who say, well, a Biden administration means they're going to come for guns, ? End quote. Biden responds, bingo. He goes, I'll do the Biden voice. Bingo, you're right. If you have an assault weapon, the fact of the matter is, they should be illegal, period. That's the thing he always says. The fact of the matter is something he always says, and then he also says period, and then he does this. Here's the deal. He points at the camera when he says it. Those are the constant Biden iterations. Now, he said, and then I think he said he's going to appoint Beto O'Rourke as his gun czar, so he's pretty much going to get rid of assault weapons. And then assault weapons, they'll never specifically say exactly what they are. Any type of assault weapon ban, it's cosmetics. I am familiar with it because I live in New Jersey. The cosmetics are you can't have an adjustable stock. You can't have more than 10 rounds in a magazine. You cannot have a fluted or a threaded barrel. Threaded barrel is for suppressors. If you want to put a suppressor or a what's that thing called exactly? It's supposed to cut down on the explosion that comes out of your rifle. I don't remember the name of it exactly, the part. So it's a lot of cosmetic stuff. They don't want you to put a grip on it. That's another thing. You don't want you to put a grip on your rifle. I think that's another thing they don't want you to do. It's all cosmetic stuff. Nothing really makes anything assault weapon. When people think about assault weapon, when they hear that, they think of a fully auto rifle. Those rifles are not legal in New Jersey, and if you have it, it has to be on an NFA list, which I'm going to get to. Now, the idea that we don't have, and this is a quote from Biden, and I quote, the idea that we don't have elimination of assault-type weapons, magazines that can hold multiple bullets in them, it's absolutely mindless. It is no violation of the Second Amendment. It is just a bow to special interests of the gun manufacturers and the NRA, Biden said, September 2019. All right, so I'm going to get into this National Firearms Act. So what he wants to do is, in 1934, the federal government came out with the National Firearms Act. The reason they did that was because of some huge massacre. I think partially it also had to do with the mobsters that were running around with their Tommy guns because they were fully auto. The NFA, the National Firearms Act, made all those guns that were fully automatic. You had to register them under the federal government, and then on top of that, you had to pay a tax. The tax at that time was also $200. That tax, if you $200 to them years ago, I looked it up. It's something like $3,500. It was a lot of money. So you saw a lot of people pretty much getting rid of their fully autos, and now I think it was 1984 they officially made fully autos completely illegal to anybody unless you are an FFL, so you're a federal firearms licensor, somebody that sells firearms, or you're a military. Military, obviously, you can still use them, and if you're what's it called? If you're a law enforcement agency, you can buy them and I guess hold on to them for people that, the SWAT operations or what have you. So pretty much those are illegal. Those are illegal for individual gun owners, fully auto rifles or fully auto submachine guns. Suppressors as well are on that list as an NFA item, National Firearms Act item, and those need to be federally, you need a list for those as well. There is a federal registry for those. And you also have to pay a $200 tax. So pretty much this is all to deter people from buying any of this stuff. That's the point of all this. It's just like all the different taxes. So what he wants to do is he wants the rifles, all rifles, that he considers as assault-type weapons, which can just really be any rifle, and anything with any high-capacity magazine, you have to register under NFA and you're going to have to pay a $200 tax. So if you, and high capacity magazines in states like New Jersey or states like Vermont, which they recently just passed, and I didn't even know they did this because from what I understood, I thought they were very pro-gun. I guess they aren't. I think they passed it last year. It is now a 10-round magazine. Anything above that's considered a high capacity. Same thing in New Jersey. It is a 10-round magazine. It used to be 15, but they dropped it once Murphy became the governor. He pushed that legislation through, because he's a hack job loser. So it went from 15 to 10 rounds. So anything above 10 is considered a high capacity magazine. And then when Biden, the very troubling thing is, he says magazines that can hold multiple bullets in them. Multiple bullets, that could be anything, that could be two rounds. That's multiple. So what do you say? You know, he's just very, very foggy and broad in what he says. Purposely, it's ominous purposely, because then it's easier for them to implement their policy, to be completely broad like that, and then use terms like assault, because it's all focus group tested words. The same thing when Obama, if you notice in that interview, Obama used the term, he used undocumented workers, which usually they call them undocumented immigrants or undocumented citizens. They are illegal aliens. That is actually the term that is in the Constitution. That is the legal term for them. Now, if you want to fight over that, saying illegal aliens, then you're just going to have to change the laws. I guess you're going to have to change the legal terms, because that's what they're actually called by the law. It's illegal aliens. But there's a focus group tested answer and term that you're supposed to use that the Democrat Party exalts, and it is undocumented workers or undocumented immigrants. And that policy of separating people, that whole thing was an Obama policy. Obama created the cages in 2014. All those pictures are Obama administration pictures in 2014. And when Trump actually stepped into the presidency, he actually changed around the system, because he thought it was inhumane in the way in which he made these cages or what have these facilities a little nicer. He put some more money into the program, which is something that the media doesn't cover. But this is a policy that was left over from the Obama administration that Trump came in and walked into, and it was just going on until the media made it like it was a really, really, like he was very inhumane, like he's the one that appointed this system, where the real actual story is, it is an Obama system that was implemented, and it was just continuing under President Trump at that time. So that's another thing they do to trick you. They use these focus group tested answers and words and phrases that sound good, because when you think of assault weapons or assault type rifles, you think assault, you think, oh my god, it's like playing Call of Duty, because they used to call the rifles that you use in the games, they used to call them assault rifles. And then even Halo, they called the one fully automatic rifle, they called the assault rifle, and then they called the other one the battle rifle, for any of you Halo players out there. But those are the terms that they use. So essentially, this proposition from the Biden administration, if it was a Biden administration, would make you pay $200 for every single magazine that is above 10 rounds, which is an insane amount of money that you could spend if you own multiple magazines. I know some people that they'll have an AK, they'll own 4 magazines, so you're going to pay $800 just to own your magazines. And on top of that, your rifle, your AK, you're gonna spend an extra $200, so you're spending like $1,000. Or they implement a program where they'll buy it back from you. And buy back. Think about this, buy back. They're going to buy it back with your money to begin with. And buyback would imply, the term buyback implies that the government is buying something back that you bought from them. No one bought their guns from the government. No one went to the federal government and got their guns. Everyone went to a private dealer. So, I think Steven Crowder said it the other day, for every single gun I bought from the federal government, I am very willing to let them buy it back. Which is 0. There is no gun that I'm willing to let them buy back, because I never bought a gun from them. So now you're looking at a policy, the biggest, I'd like to say the biggest warning that I have here for gun owners, because I've texted a couple friends about this, and some friends are outraged, like, dude, that's ridiculous. I got some friends that go, oh, well, at least I get to keep my rifle. No, that's not the way it should work. We should be unyielding. We should be adamant. We should not be willing to allow these people, we should not give them an inch on the Second Amendment debate at all, especially at this point in New Jersey. We're living under here There should be no other gun reform. There should be no other policies at this point. The idea of a national registry for rifles it's absurd. It is astonishing that anyone even stands by it, like the registration of your rifle. Do you realize how effective a rifle is? I've been reading these Federalist Papers. The point of the Second Amendment is so the people, if the government is encroaching on them, they are able to answer them back with force, or at least show force, brandish a weapon to show them that we're not messing around. If we have nothing but pistols, we would stand no chance against the military or government. There would be no shot for us because we would not be able to partake effectively in any type of long-range operations. Once you shoot a pistol round only goes so far. Once it starts dropping, it is inaccurate compared to an AR-15 round at 100 yards. I mean, even an AK round at 100 yards maybe yields like a 2-inch drop, but at least it's somewhat effective in stopping power and the distance and aim. It's easier to shoot a rifle. Now, there's been scenarios where there's been mass shooters as well in the Sutherland Springs in Texas. This was about 2 or 3 years ago. Might have even been longer than that. There was a mass shooting, shot up. This individual was fully riot geared out. He had a bulletproof ballistic vest on. He shot up an entire, I think it was a Baptist church. There was a gentleman named Steve Williford. He was an NRA instructor. He confronted the individual, confronted him with an AR-15, was able to get him. I think the guy was hiding behind a car. They were having a battle back and forth. He was able to get him. Eventually, he suppressed the target. And in doing so, he even said after all this in interviews, he was on Steven Crowder's. It was a very emotional interview for this guy. I mean, it was sad. He was crying, he was breaking down, and he said, if I didn't have a rifle, if I didn't have that AR-15, I would have never been able to penetrate his armor because the AR-15 round goes at about 2,000 feet per second. It's much more penetrating or armor piercing than a pistol round. Pistol round, especially in a long range ordeal, anything that's further than, maybe 20, 25 yards, anything that's further than that, and if you're fighting somebody with a rifle from a longer range, you really are at a huge technical disadvantage or a tactical disadvantage for sure. So, not only are these rifles needed to fight our government. I've heard this argument before. Oh, you think that you could stand up to the tanks and you could stand up to this and that from the government? And guess what? Small arms are the only things that have been used in Afghanistan and Iraq, and look how that's worked out. It's been 20 years we've been in the Middle East, and we still can't suppress the target over there, and all they've used is AKs from the Soviet Union from the 70s in the Afghan War. So that's my argument for them. So not only are those guns meant to defend us from the government trying to take our rights from us and encroach on us, but it is also used to take out bad guys as well. And in a world where you ban rifles, the law-abiding citizen will no longer have it, and the bad guys will. Because no type of law really, if the bad guy's already going to rob the bank, he doesn't care if he breaks one of the gun restriction laws. That's going to conclude this video. Now, I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe. This is going to be a Sunday special. I'm going to be coming back Monday with a Federalist paper outline. I have so much other show information that I want to put out there. Maybe next week around the middle of the week. Not really sure exactly, but I appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you have any criticisms or concerns, shoot me an email. I have it in the description. Everything that I've explained here, all these articles are also going to be in the description as well. I greatly appreciate you for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe, drop the mic, let everybody know about the podcast. Thank you, and everyone have a good weekend. I will see you all on Monday.